Hey, what's going on there, guys? I'm back here today with another deck tech for you. Today we're going to be taking a look at a standard deck, and it's Naya Slivers. So this is a green, red, and white tribal-based deck that runs all Sliver creatures for our creature base. And the basic game plan is going to be to turn things sideways and just bash our opponent in as quick as possible. And we're able to do so with all the different beneficial abilities and stats that our Slivers are going to grant to all of our Sliver creatures. These could vary with power and toughness boosts to things like double strike, vigilance, and haste. So before we get to taking a look at what this deck looks like, if you guys have any suggestions for decks that you would like to see, please leave them down in the comments below and I'll take them into consideration for future deck techs. And be sure to check out the playlists in the description below where I have all the previous decks that I've covered on the channel, including modern decks and budget decks as well. So the creature base is probably the heaviest base that we have in our deck. We only have 8 non-creature spells in our main board. So starting off with our creatures, we have a playset of Predatory Sliver. So Predatory Sliver is one of the key fundamental cards that we have in our early game. He's a 1/1 for 1 generic and 1 green. And Sliver creatures we control get +1/+1. So being able to have that universal +1/+1 for all of our Slivers is going to be nice in the early game when we want to get a jump on how big our creatures are, and being able to keep them in a power and toughness that our opponent can't match is going to be really important. We have a playset of Manaweft Sliver. So this Sliver is a 1/1 for 1 generic and 1 green, and it grants all of our Sliver creatures to have tap and add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. So with it, it's going to be important in allowing us to ramp into things like Door of Destinies or our Megantic Sliver a whole lot earlier. Also the same thing with like Bonescythe Sliver and Thorncaster Sliver as well. It just lets us play things earlier. And at the same time, it's going to allow us to keep mana open post-sideboard for things like Boros Charm when we're playing up against control and we're trying to keep away from our opponent using things like Supreme Verdict on our creatures. Then we have 3 Sentinel Slivers, so 2/2 for 1 generic and 1 white. Sliver creatures you control have Vigilance, so this is going to be nice up against the aggro matchups or any matchups where we want to swing in with our creatures and also have them as blockers for anything that our opponent's trying to do. It's equally as good for playing up against control where along with the Manaweft Sliver, we're able to swing in with our creatures and still hold them back for mana for things like Boros Charm. Then we have a 3/of for Steelform Sliver. So he's not as favorable as probably the other Slivers, but he's still a 2/2 for 3 that is going to grant all Slivers that we control +0/+1. So the toughness boost can be somewhat good for us playing up against other creature-based decks, where if we have the jump on toughness, we're able to keep our creatures back as blockers until we can just push them over the edge with their power. And making sure that our opponents don't swing in is going to be another key aspect with Steelform Sliver, and it usually gets the job done for that. Making our toughness for our creatures bigger is going to be pretty convenient. We have a playset of Blur Sliver. So Blur Sliver is a 2/2 for 3, and he is going to grant haste to all of our creatures. So being able to swing in with cards like Megantic Sliver whenever we play it off the top, or Bonescythe Sliver, or even Thorncaster is nice, but one of the key things about Blur Sliver is being able to play up against control post-Wrath, and having Blur Sliver and any other cheap Sliver to play in our hand held back. So our opponent uses like Supreme Verdict or Terminus on us, which Terminus is a little bit more unfortunate because we can't use like Boros Charm against them. But being able to have Blur Sliver and any other Sliver with mana open to cast both of them is going to allow us to swing in post-Wrath with both of our creatures, or any creatures that we can swing in with off the Sliver. Then we have Bonescythe Sliver as a 3/of, so 2/2 for 4, and Sliver creatures you control have Double Strike. So the Double Strike is going to be nice, especially against creature-heavy matchups where big power and toughness, or even sizable power and toughness, is good, but sometimes it's not enough to deal with a huge board of creatures. So Double Strike is going to be one of those easy ways to assure us that our swings are going to stick and they are going to be blocked, especially if they're sizable enough, because our opponent isn't going to take a huge chunk of life away just because we're swinging in with like 1 or 2 creatures, they're generally going to be bound to block with some smaller things, and that's exactly what we want to do. Then we have a playset of Thorncaster Sliver. So he's a 2/2 for 5, and Sliver creatures we control have, whenever this creature attacks, it deals 1 damage to target creature or player. And so, especially if we have multiple of Thorncaster, if we have like 2 of them on the board, then the abilities are going to stack and they're all going to trigger. So each instance is going to trigger, which is really convenient for us. It kind of works like Sublime Archangel with Exalted and double instances of Exalted for reference. But Thorncaster Sliver is nice because it turns all of our creatures into either dealing more damage or being able to ping and get rid of other creatures that our opponents have, especially like things like Lingering Soul tokens or anything like that. Any small creatures that our opponents have are just going to be wiped out, and any other creatures that our opponents have, we can just gang up with all of our creatures and get rid of something bigger, or we can just direct that damage to our opponent and just start bashing it at them and dwindling their life away. Then we have 3 Megantic Slivers, so 3/3 for 6. Slivers you control get +3/+3, so he himself is a 6/6, but being able to grant +3/+3 across the whole board is going to be nice for us, making anything that isn't as big a little bit more threatening. So it's kind of like the bigger finisher where we're playing up against like other creatures, or we're just trying to get enough damage in. We can drop Megantic Sliver and just be able to get in there for just enough. Then moving away from our creatures to our non-creature spells. So we have 3 Domri Rade. Our Domri Rade is going to be like one of the easiest ways to search for more creatures, also allow our creatures to fight other creatures that our opponents have and get them off the board. And with the -7, we get an emblem where creatures we control have double strike, trample, hexproof, and haste. So it's just going to push us up and over the edge of making our creatures really sizable. So Domri Rade is probably the most useful because we are so creature heavy in using the +1 ability and allowing us to look at the top card of our library. If it's a creature card, we can reveal it and put it into our hand, which allows us to essentially kind of just draw more cards per turn if they are creatures on the top. If not, then we just get to see our next draw, whether it's going to be like a land for turn, or if it's going to be another spell that we have like Door of Destinies, Hive Stirrings, or something that we have on the sideboard like Bonfire of the Damned. So it kind of lets us plan for what we're going to have, or it lets us draw more. We have 3 Door of Destinies. So Door of Destinies is a 4-cost artifact, and whenever it enters the battlefield, we choose a creature type, which in our case it's going to be Slivers. Whenever we cast a Sliver spell, we are going to put a charge counter on Door of Destinies. And creatures you control of the chosen type get a +1/+1 for each charge counter on Door of Destinies. So with more Slivers that we play, they're just going to keep on getting gradually bigger, which is going to just make them so much more threatening and so much more lethal. So Door of Destinies is just kind of that anthem effect that is just going to get bigger and better for us with the more creatures that we end up playing. Even against like control, if we can just hit 1 haste creature on the board, if our Door of Destinies is already at like 3 or 4, then that's just going to be a huge chunk that we're able to deal in 1 turn. And then the last spell that we have is Hive Stirrings. So I still wanted to have this just as a 2-of in the board. It's a sorcery for 3 and put 2 1/1 colorless Sliver creature tokens onto the battlefield. So like if we're playing up against a deck that's a little bit more aggressive than we are at the stage that we're at in the game, we can play the Hive Stirrings with the intent of keeping them as blockers. But whenever we're in the stages where it's kind of like the mid to late game where we're just trying to flood the board and just trying to get a little bit more presence, having Hive Stirrings and making more 1/1s is going to be nice, especially if we already have haste and any amount of a buff on the creatures on our Slivers as it is. It's just going to put more creatures on the board and give us more blockers or more attackers that we can use against our opponent. And then for our land base, we have 24 lands. We have a playset of Cavern of Souls. So Cavern of Souls is going to provide any color of mana for our Sliver creatures. Unfortunately, it taps for generic for any non-creature spells that we have. But the Sliver creatures that we are casting with mana provided by the Cavern of Souls are going to be uncounterable, which gives us a nice edge up against control-based decks. The only things that are going to be counterable are our non-creature spells, or if we want to go and cast like 2 slivers per turn and one of them isn't going to be paid for with Cavern of Souls. But either way, off of the Cavern of Souls, it's going to mana fix for us a little bit in terms of our creatures and also provide uncounterable creatures. We have 3 Mutavault, and Mutavault is really perfect in this deck, especially with all the buffs that we have going around. It taps for generic mana, and for 1 mana it becomes a 2/2 creature with all creature types until the end of the turn. It's still a land, so with Mutavault, having it be a sliver, it's going to get all of the benefits from all of our other slivers and all the abilities that they have, so it's just another one of those creatures that can swing in with us. Even if we go like turn 2 and we can't do anything else, we can still animate Mutavault and swing in with it if we played Mutavault turn 1. Because it's still going to have summoning sickness like any other creatures if we go to animate it. Then for our dual lands, we have a playset of each of the shocks. So we have a playset of Stomping Ground, playset of Temple Garden, and a playset of Sacred Foundry. And then for our remaining dual lands, we have 3 Rootbound Crag and 2 Sunpetal Grove that'll play off of our shock lands that we have included in the deck. So that's what we have for our Tribal Slivers deck for the main board. Now let's jump over and take a look at what we're packing in our sideboard. So for our sideboard here, the first card that we have is Boros Charm, and it's a playset. Boros Charm is probably going to be the most useful up against control, and any deck that's generally going to be packing a playset of Supreme Verdict, it's just the easiest way to overcome those decks and to overcome that Supreme Verdict. Granted, we don't really have a way of being able to overcome Terminus, but Supreme Verdict is probably going to be the most consistent way that any deck is going to be able to board wipe us, so having a ace in the hole up against those decks is going to be nice. Boros Charm also can give double strike to one of our creatures, or it can deal damage to our opponent. It deals 4 damage to them. So if it means winning the game off of either of those abilities, we can go for it. But being able to give Indestructible to our permanents is probably going to be the most useful thing against like Supreme Verdict Wraths. We have a 3-of for Bonfire of the Damned. So Bonfire is going to be one of those nice ways to deal with creature-heavy decks where even off of the mana sliver, with all of the slivers that we have, we can tap them for mana and play into our miracle cost, or even hard casting the Bonfire. It just makes board wiping any creatures of any size a whole lot easier and not having to deal with them. It also deals damage to our opponent as well, so it's an easy way to just kind of grind them out of their life as well, especially with tapping our slivers for mana. We have a 3-of for Pillar of Flame, so Pillar of Flame is going to be nice up against like early aggressive decks, anything like red deck wins, the green-red aggro-based decks. It's also going to be nice up against the Aristocrats matchup, like Junk Aristocrats, where we can just start getting rid of their Blood Artists, their Voice of Resurgence. They can't play around those cards. So Pillar of Flame is nice to be able to get rid of any smaller creatures. For the singletons that I have in the deck, I have Primeval Bounty, so it's an enchantment for 6, and I like to set it in for mid-range and control. And whenever we cast a creature spell, put a 3/3 onto the battlefield under our control. Whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we put 3+1/+1s on target creature we control, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we gain 3 life. So it makes every single play that we make with our deck a whole lot better. Even if it's just dropping a land off of like top deck mode, we gain life back at least. So Primeval Bounty against like mid-range allows us to make more creatures. Granted, the creatures aren't going to be gaining any beneficial stats from like all of our other slivers that we have, but it's a 3/3 nonetheless that can be used to attack or even to block. Being able to cast like Domri Rade and then put +1/+1s on a creature and then use it to fight another creature is going to be nice. Or like Door of Destinies or Hive Stirrings, just being able to use the Primeval Bounty to make use of our plays is going to be nice. I also have Garruk, Caller of the Beasts, as just a 1-of. So for loyalty 6 cost, he's going to be another one of those cards that I side in up against mid-range and control. His most useful feature is his +1, allowing us to reveal the top 5 cards of our library. We put all creature cards revealed this way into our hand, and the rest onto the bottom of our library in any order. So being able to fill our hand with a variety of different slivers that we have off the top is going to be nice. It fills our hand with creatures that we need, creatures that we're going to use, and creatures that we can play after board wipes or any removal that may hit the creatures that are already existing on the battlefield. The -3 doesn't see as much play for me. It's really not going to be useful for anything except the Megantic Sliver because it costs 6 mana. So that's probably the only thing that you would ever -3 for. And the -7 is just going to be a huge blowout where whenever we cast a creature, then we're going to be able to search our library for another creature card and put it onto the battlefield and then shuffle our library. The emblem is permanent. There's no way to get rid of that emblem. So we're just going to be finding more creatures, and we're going to be playing more creatures that are going to be relevant for whatever situation we're in. We can just search for any ability sliver that we have and just plop it on the board. I have one Oblivion Ring for just being able to get rid of planeswalkers, creatures that are troublesome, anything like that. It's pretty universal for what it can get rid of. Also enchantments or artifacts that our opponents are using against us. And the last card that I have is Purify the Grave, and it's a 2-of, so being able to play it against any decks that have synergies with their graveyard, so like Junk Rights or any other Reanimator style decks, we can just side in our Purify the Grave and not allow them to play around cards like Unburial Rites. So that is our sideboard for Naya Slivers, and that is our deck for Naya Slivers. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. The entire deck list is down below where you guys can check it out and use it as a reference. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel as well. And you'll be informed of more Magic the Gathering videos to come. And until next time, guys, have yourselves a wonderful, fun-filled Magic the Gathering day.